In example 3, we are going to be talking about domain and range. So before we go to example 3, let's think about some definitions real quick. Domain. Your definition for domain is all the possible x values, and your range is going to be all the possible y values. So domain is x, range is y. One way I like to remember that is in alphabetical order. Domain starts with D, D comes before R, and then alphabetically x comes before y. Just one way to remember domain versus range. Now, as we take a look at example 3, we're trying to find domain and range from the graph. So it says the graph of an exponential function is shown in the figure below. The horizontal asymptote is shown as a dashed line, just like we do it on our own graph. Find the range and the domain. So if I look and see, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the domain. And our domain is our possible x values. So if I take a look at my possible x values, that means I'm looking along this axis right here. And I need to think about, are there any x values that I can choose that won't find a point on my graph? For instance, if I choose -4 as an x value, and I look to see, it will hit my graph right here at 4. If I choose -2 hits my graph right here at about 2.5. If I go to 4, I can see that 4 is on my graph. It's getting super close to that asymptote, but it still has a point there. And since my graph is going to go on forever in this direction, any point that I pick out here will eventually find a point on my graph, super close to the asymptote. If I go to the left, again, -6, I find a point here. This graph is also going up, and as it goes up, it's going to go out, which means every x value in this direction will also find a point somewhere on my graph. So my domain here is every possible x value. Now there are two ways to write that. You could write your domain is all real numbers, or you could write it in what's called interval notation. In interval notation, we would say that we are going from, on our x-axis, all the way down to -infinity to positive infinity, covering the entire line. So interval notation you'll put it in parentheses because we're not including -infinity and positive infinity because they're not actual numbers. So we would say from -infinity to positive infinity and close the parentheses. So all real numbers in interval notation looks like that. Alex will switch back and forth between the two depending on what problems you're using. So that's why I wanted to show you both. When it comes time for the test that you're going to take on paper, you can use either one. But just know Alex will require you at some points to use the all real numbers, and at some point they'll specify the interval notation. Now, if we take a look at the range, that's when we're looking at all our y values. So now we're looking along the y-axis. As I travel along the y-axis, remember this is going to continue to go up. So all these y values up here will eventually find a point on my graph over here. Just like -6 comes right here, not -6, +6 is over here, +4 is over here. And as I travel down, if I go down here to, let's say, 1 will never find a point on my graph. If I go to 2, well, 2 is where my asymptote's at. And remember, that asymptote is not part of our graph, so I can't really have a range that's equal to 2 either. Basically, what I have is I have everything above that asymptote or everything above 2. So we can write that in two different ways. We can say that our y values have to be greater than 2. Remember, it's not equal to because that's where our asymptote is. Or if we do it in interval notation, to write y is greater than 2 in interval notation, we're going to do parenthesis, and we're starting with the 2. Okay, this always has to be the smallest number. Parentheses is for when it's not included, and we'll do a bracket if it is included. So we're going to have a parenthesis, and we're going from 2, and then we're going all the way up forever, so it's from 2 to infinity. So with the interval notation, again, this number, the first one, is always the smallest number, and this one will always be our biggest number. Parentheses when it's not included, and then you'll see a bracket, something like this, if it is included. Next, what I would like you to do is to try this. When you are done doing it, you can unpause it and check your answer. So go ahead and pause it now. If you did this correctly, your domain should be all real numbers Or if you did it in interval notation, it would be negative infinity to positive infinity. And the range, you could say, is y is less than 3. Or if you did it in interval notation, it would be from negative infinity to 3, not including the 3. If you have questions on either way to write it, let me know.